Hey there, guys. Brian here. Just a reminder that you can now support The Other 51. If you go to patreon.com/The Other 51, you can find out information there on how to make a donation or become a subscriber. Again, that's patreon.com/The Other 51. Thanks. Now on with the show. Every writer knows that the best conversations about writing don't happen in classrooms or symposia or any other fancy artisanal setting. They happen at the bar, usually after deadline. That's the vibe we're going for here. This is The Other 51, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Brian Moritz. Today's guest is Kendall Baker from Sports Internet. Kendall Baker, welcome to The Other 51. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate having me on.
And this is exciting for me. This is in all the 65 episodes I've done of this. This is the first time I've had a newsletter author as my guest. So I'm glad that you're the first one of that.
I'm glad too, and I think there's a reason for that. There just aren't many, especially daily sports newsletters, and that's actually a big reason why I started this.
Yeah, so I wanted to first of all just kind of give you a chance to talk about Sports Internet. I can rave about it. It's funny for being a guy who is the sports media guy and writes blogs about it and studies it and teaches classes about it. The confession is I watch very little sports. And so really the email that I get from you, usually about 7 a.m. Eastern time, is how I catch up on kind of getting set for the day of what happened the night before in sports. So I appreciate that. You make it a lot easier for me in the morning to kind of catch up on sports.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I love hearing that because that's exactly what I set out to do with this. So in a nutshell, sports internet to me and as readers have told me it is Sports Center in email form in a way.
Okay.
It is here's what happened yesterday, and not entirely here's what happened yesterday, all recapping. Some of it is, and here's what's coming up tonight. Here's what's important. And so, yeah, it really is. When I set out to do this, my hypothesis was you can take yesterday's news and or the relevant news, whatever you want to call it, and you can fit that into one native email. I think you can do that. I think, the way most sports fans are used to consuming sports news is, very social media heavy, push notifications, and that's great. But I think there's a emphasis, particularly in sports, because so much is always happening and so much of it is video based or highlight based. There's a emphasis on here's what happened, but there's not much and what does it mean or why does it matter? And there's not much depth to a lot of sports coverage. Like, most people know what happened yesterday. They know that this person was traded. They know that this thing happened. But when you actually sit down to talk to them about, okay, well, what does that mean for the team that traded him? Or what does that mean for this or that? There's not much there because all people really got was a push notification. And so what I'm trying to kind of reverse with this is, it is kind of like your Twitter feed in the morning, right? Mm-hmm. But as opposed to your Twitter feed, which is very surface level, this is essentially like more in-depth Twitter where you're catching up, you're seeing what's happening, and there's actually an explanation and a potentially an opinion and something to give you more meat and potentially something to even arm you with knowledge for, a conversation that will probably arise that day at your office or with your boss or whatever. And now all of a sudden you not only know what's going on in sports, but you're ready to talk about it and you're ready to even debate it if you'd like.
It's a great newsletter, I must say that. But it's so funny to hear it described like that and to realize when I think about what it is, it's like this daily thing that's delivered to you that tells you what happened in the sports world yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And that's wonderful, and that's like, and there's part of me as the old newspaper guy thinking, wow, that sounds really familiar, like what I used to do every day and what we used to put out today. It is really kind of like that, almost, you don't want to say old school because it's not, but that kind of summary, that kind of newspaper mentality of like, and I think what's valuable about it and newsletter and that mentality is like catching up on Twitter is great and like going online and kind of figuring out is great, but that's like not just surface level, like you said. That's
Yeah.
all like coming at you a million miles an hour, and it's hard. There's
Right.
no context to it. There's no hierarchy. There's no like volume control on it.
Yep.
And so what you do, kind of like that idea of a daily sports newsletter, I think, and then this extrapolates out. There are news newsletters. There's political ones, whatever. But that it really does extrapolate out. I think it kind of, it's like we all binged on digital media for like 5 to 10 years, and now we're like trying to figure out the happy medium place.
Right. And I think, one thing that is happening and one of the big reasons for the kind of newsletter explosion, actually, I mean, I've been in the newsletter business for a little while now. My previous job was at another newsletter called The Hustle, which covers tech and business news.
Okay.
But I think the big reason for the newsletter explosion is kind of what you said. We're binging on, like, there's too much information out there. And there's, couple that with the fact that people are getting a lot of that information via social feeds. It just does feel very overwhelming, and it feels like you're kind of on this 24/7 treadmill if you are somebody that wants to follow anything. And so I think part of the value that I provide is, yes, I'm curating, yesterday's news. Obviously, there's original takes in there and all that, but for the most part, here is, a curation for you, but I'm actually curating the curators in a way. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like if you handed your best friend who knows a lot about sports your phone and say, go through my Twitter and then report back to me in an hour with the 10 things that you found on my Twitter that I should know. Mm-hmm. And you just saved yourself an hour.
Right. So we've kind of hinted at this big thematic reason for newsletters, but I'm wondering for this specific project, like why this newsletter? Like how did this idea, you said you were working at The Hustle doing another newsletter, and you've been writing, digital media, digital sports for a while now. Like how did this idea, walk me through like this specific idea, how it came to fruition?
Yeah, of course. Well, when I was in college, I actually, and I still have the piece of paper, it's kind of one of those like funny things. I wrote down like I want to start a sports media company, and then there was like another bullet, newsletter. Okay. and so it's this thing that's been on my mind for a while. And when I was at The Hustle, like, and part of the reason for even taking a job at a company like that, which is a very small, startup media company, I really wanted to see how you grow and how you launch products and how you build audience. And we ended up, I ended up launching the daily newsletter there, and it was so effective that it was just, doing that every day, writing tech business every day. It was just very easy for me to envision doing that, but for sports. And when I set out to do this, I sent my first email in September, and for the first 3 months, I really did iterate like crazy. I think I probably sent 30 different formats. Okay. Because to me, as a diehard sports fan, I had my idea of like, okay, what's the best way to, summarize the news and get people up to speed. But sports is unique. Like tech and business news, what we settled on at The Hustle and what works is like there's about 4 to 5, big stories a day. And what a lot of consumers need in that space is an explanation, because unlike sports, they a lot of times haven't even heard that happened. Whereas sports, there a lot more happens, but it's across different sports. Some people like this sport, some people don't like this sport, and I'm really going after like the general sports fan. And so, through months of iteration, where I did one that was very focused on deep dives. I did one that looked kind of like The Skim. I really kind of like looked at a bunch of newsletters that were out there and kind of tried to replicate what they do well. And I ended up on the format that I have now, which is essentially like numbered modules. And to me, why I ended up on this, and it was through my feel, it was through what the numbers were saying, it was through feedback that I got. We did a bunch of surveys. I think what we landed on here is it really is. I know I used the example of Twitter before, but you can really use any example. It really is like each section. I treat each sport like it's, if you were going to ESPN's /NBA, right? Mm-hmm. And their homepage there, it's like for each sport, like there's that top story, and then there's the other stuff. Well, I basically do that for each sport, but in 200 words, mm-hmm. where you're able to very quickly see, oh, there's the top NBA story, and then a few more NBA things. Oh, there's the top NHL story, and then a few more NHL things. And if you happen to not want NHL news, you literally scroll your thumb down 5 inches. Right. It's like it really it gives you everything, and then you can, depending on your interests, scroll past it. So it really is like offering a sports fan a little bit of everything, and I think that actually helps me cover my bases because I have a very, diverse readership. I have, in the beginning, I'm not doing this anymore because I just wanted to cut out the friction of subscribing. But in the beginning, I was asking people on a scale of 1 to 5 how big of sports fans they are, and a lot of 5s, a lot of 4s, but there's actually a decent number of 1s who have become, loyal readers, and I think that's because this newsletter and newsletters in general allow you to follow an industry that you wouldn't really know how to do on your own. It's kind of like if you ask somebody who doesn't follow sports, okay, start following sports, they won't even know the websites to go to.
Right.
They won't know anything. So the fact that I'm literally just sending them an email, here, just read this. Now all of a sudden they can follow something that they would have felt like they couldn't even start to begin to even understand. And now all of a sudden they're like, oh, I know all about this. And so a very diverse readership. And I think by providing and covering everything, you inform people who don't know something about X sport. And then you also, the people who, like me, who are sports nerds and love everything and know everything about everything, I always try to have something in there, even for those people. Like, obviously, they're still reading, they're enjoying it, but, like, I always want somebody to come away, even if you have a huge, vast sports knowledge, learning something or having seen something that you wouldn't see elsewhere. So it's a constant balance of, like, SportsCenter in email form, but also, like, let's cover some stuff that SportsCenter isn't going to cover. Because I think that allows me to, be this daily touch point and also be almost like a discovery tool for a lot of sports fans.
Did that surprise you, the fact that you had a lot of like non-diehard sports fans as subscribers?
It did at first, but I think, especially having talked to them as well, I talk to all my readers. That's like a huge thing, that I push. Like, people respond all the time. I get back to them in like 5 seconds. Like, I love doing that. And from hearing their feedback, which kind of led me to what I just said, like, I think it makes sense. It's I'm allowing them, because I think a lot of people who aren't sports fans, like, sports is one of those things that I think, like, nobody really hates sports. Like, I think some people don't follow sports because they just, like, don't follow them, but, like, they're always interested. And I think, and so when you're able to, like, create something that allows them to follow along, I don't, like, sports is one of those things where, like, when you wake up in the morning and you got a couple emails in your inbox, and one of them is like business news, and one is like sports. It's like, I'm gonna read the sports one,
right?
And so I just think it's very, if you can turn people who don't have a deep appreciation of sports into people who are following it on a daily basis, I think there's actually a very high probability that they will develop a deeper appreciation for sports, because it's just a constant reality show. You never know what's going to happen, and it's fun in that way to follow along on a daily basis. Yeah,
it's that line Charlie Pierce has always written. Hamlet's been performed 1,000 times, but Hamlet always dies in the end. And so you mentioned how you iterated like crazy early on when you started. I want to expand on that a little bit. So when you started out, like, you don't have to go through every iteration, of course, but like, what was the original look and feel of your newsletter, and kind of what are the major changes that have happened on it?
So the biggest change was, in the beginning, I was a lot more focused on curation, in the sense of, like, it was a lot more excerpts, and it was a lot more me reading the best articles and pulling the best quotes. And it was a lot less. It was a lot less me and, like, my voice, and a lot more other people's voices, and me basically being like, "Here's the best stuff on the internet." Right. I think the biggest change from then to now is now it's a lot more, and it's not just like me. I'm not trying to make this about me, but there's a lot more of, like, as opposed to somebody sending you an email with all the best stuff and kind of treating it. I almost treated it more like a launch pad, where it's like, here's all the good stuff that if you would have surfed the internet for 5 hours, this is the stuff you would have loved. Here it is. Go read it, or, like, enjoy it, or just skim it here and you're good. I think what's changed is it's a lot. Now it's more, hey, I'm your friend. Let me, of course, uncover some articles for you to go read, but also let me provide some original takes. Let me break this down. Let me talk more conversationally, which is actually more my wheelhouse. So when I started it out, maybe it was almost a confidence thing. I didn't have the confidence to be like, make it a little bit more about like me and make it more like your friend emailing you. Okay. And I was really relying on, excerpts and a lot more other stuff. And so, yeah, that's probably the biggest change is that now it's a lot more. That stuff's still there, but it's a lot more of like me guiding you through the sports news as opposed to, uncovering the best stuff in a way.
So I remember you wrote about this a few weeks ago. You kind of walked through your day and the process on it. And I'd like you to do this. I've restarted my weekly newsletter. It's kind of sports media news based. It's a top 5 thing. And I got to tell you, it's exhausting to try to do a weekly one and to try to keep up with a weekly one. I can only imagine the daily grind of it. So what's a day look like for you? Because I'm getting this email, and you're in San Francisco. I'm in New York. I'm getting this email at like 7 o'clock my time. So do you sleep, first of all?
I do sleep.
Okay.
I do sleep. And I will tell you, I think, first of all, I think you hear people in the sports world say this a lot, and I just think it's so true. Like, I cannot complain about what I'm doing. Like, obviously I'm still, in startup mode and entrepreneur mode, and that's the grind for me is like not making money. Well, I'm making money on the side right now, but like that's really like the hardest part and the one thing that would be like, oh man. But like the hours and the fact that like I don't really have much of a social life right now, that is totally fine with me because I'm literally writing about sports for a living. I am totally fine with that. That is like I almost pinch myself every day that